we have another distinguished scientist, researcher, administrator, full of experience regarding fisheries today. Mark DIMECH has a great CV. I'm gonna introduce his background first. Then he is going to give a conference to us on business planning in fisheries management, the ecosystem approach to fisheries process, as well as what is going on in Turkey in terms of EAF. Mark DIMECH holds a bachelor honors degree in biology and chemistry, as well as master's degree in biology in the University of Malta. He obtained PhD in marine ecology at the School of Ocean Science in the United Kingdom, focusing on ecosystem effects of fishing. In the past, he has worked as a researcher and supervisor at the University of Malta, supervising students in fisheries, including population dynamics and stock assessment. He has worked for 5 years as a fisheries resource manager at the Ministry of Agriculture, Fisheries, Food and Animal Rights, coordinating projects related to artisanal small-scale fisheries, fishery statistics and data collection, stock assessment, even socioeconomic aspects and ecological impacts of fisheries. He is engaged with every aspects and dimensions of fisheries management. He has worked extensively within the framework of European Commission monitoring and research activities, as well as the FAO, General Fisheries Commission of the Mediterranean, the FAO sub-regional projects COPEMET, METSUDMET, EastMed, and the International Commission for Conservation of Atlantic Tunas, ICAT, so-called ICAT. He has served regularly as an expert at the European Scientific and Technical Economic Committee for Fisheries, acting as chairperson for several European Union fisheries working groups, including the International Council for Exploration of the Seas, ICS. From 2010 to 2019, during the 9 years, he has worked with the FAO, with the Fisheries and Aquaculture Department as a senior fisheries officer, where he coordinated several FAO inter-regional projects in Europe, North Africa, the Middle East, and Sub-Saharan Africa on fisheries data collection, stock assessment, and fisheries management. Since 2019, he has been working as an independent fisheries consultant for a variety of titles, including universities, NGOs, governments, international organizations, and private companies. And during the last 2 years, he has been coordinating the European project implementation of stock assessment in fisheries activities in Turkey, so-called iFish, as a technical director of this very important project. So I'm going to give the floor my dear friend, colleague, Mark DIMECH, to deliver his unique, extraordinary, from my side, extraordinary speech and the presentation. Please, Mark, take your time. Feel free to use your time between 40 minutes and 1 hour, and then we're gonna have questions, statements, and answers session. Mark?
Good morning to everyone. Thank you, Professor Vahdet, for your introduction. I will put on the presentation. Okay, I hope you can all see the presentation. So basically, what I will be talking is something which is, let's say, many people take for granted. Okay, fisheries management, we all try to do fisheries management. There are many ways how to do fisheries management, but I will be showing some really high-level fisheries management that is going around the world, okay? Which is basically the ecosystem approach. There is a big misconception about the ecosystem approach, and then I will show what's going on in Turkey. The first part of the title is business planning. Why business planning? Because most businesses succeed, like Microsoft, Amazon, okay, and many big businesses around the world, because they plan. Unfortunately, most fisheries management is not done based on planning, but on what we call usually reactive management. So something that happens and then we immediately react. So I will show a case study how certain countries do go by managing their fisheries using an approach which is used in business. Okay, we call it ecosystem approach, but it's actually coming from the business world. Okay, so let me give you a bit about my background, as Vahdet mentioned. So why am I doing this? I'm not doing this to brag or anything, okay? I'm doing this, I'm showing you this because I saw everything from working in the private sector, working at university on European research projects, supervising master and PhD students. I worked also as a fisheries manager at the ministry, so I have experience working in the fisheries administration. I worked a lot into the EU fora, like the STECF, the data collection framework. I coordinated many working groups there, and I also ICES and ICAT. And then I joined FAO for 9 years, okay? And 15 of the years while working at the ministry, and then FAO was also heavily involved in the GFCM, which is the General Fisheries Commission for the Mediterranean. And now I'm being independent. Why am I am mentioning this? Basically, is that I saw it all. Okay, I saw a lot of things from the academic perspective, from the private sector perspective, from the ministerial perspective, from the international organization perspective, FAO especially, and I saw a lot of stuff, including very high quality science, especially within the European framework, very high quality science. A lot of well-intended management. Most managers, most ministries, governments, they have a good intention. They all want to solve the problem of fisheries, make stakeholders happy, okay? So there's very well-intended management. I saw a lot of advocacy and visibility, meaning a lot of conferences, a lot of publications, okay, a lot of politics, small politics. So within let's say scientists, within administrators, but also politics at ministerial level. The EU commissioner, who is a friend of mine, the Maltese EU commissioner before the one we have here. I was in close contact with him, and I was aware of a lot of internal politics within the European framework, especially. And millions of euros spent, millions and millions every year of euros spent in trying to do well-intended fisheries management. Okay. However, I've been working in this for 20 years. Okay, 21, 22 years, something like this. And most of these things, speaking with old colleagues that are now retired, one thing that struck me is that in the 70s, before I was born in 76, so before that, in the 60s, all these were there. There was high quality science. It was the period they were developing the stock assessment models. Okay, the Bevan-Tolent Holt models, the stock recruiting relationships, a lot of well-intended management. I mean, that time, for example, ICAT was developing that there was a quota system for tuna in ICAT. But after 30 years, the system failed. Recently, the last 10 years, things started picking up again. So these things were always there. So why things never worked? We know the problems there are, especially in the Mediterranean, about overexploitation of stocks. Okay. So what's going on? Why? All this money, all this investment, and things are not working. Okay. So let me show you. So what I want to do is to show you some place that things are working. Things are actually working. You say working, what do you mean working? Okay. And for this, I want to illustrate a case study from Australian fisheries, okay? And what I will be describing here, you have the reference there. It is the status of Australian fisheries and aquatic resources. Aquatic because they include both marine and freshwater fisheries. And in this report, there is a description of the situation of the fisheries in Australia, which when I read it, I knew that the Australians were very advanced. But when I read this report recently, because it was published in 2020, I was impressed. I was very impressed. So these are some references coming from which can be found in the report, because the report describes the situation of the Australian fisheries, but all this work came from a series of works that started in the late 2000s, okay, with a group of scientists, mainly the group of Fletcher, okay, and his colleagues, and they managed to develop a framework, which is the ecosystem approach, which is in my title, based on planning, business planning, and they managed to achieve quite some striking results, which I will show you soon, okay? Basically, the management style of Australian fisheries is based on the ecosystem approach. Specifically, they work with assets. Okay, what are assets? Assets are basically in business planning, an asset is something that will provide a return. So if you are selling books, the book is your asset. If you are a bank, the financial system is the asset. If you are Amazon, all the things you can buy on Amazon are assets. So what they did in Australia is to develop a similar approach of selling books or making business with books or whatever business you can make, cars, whatever, in fisheries. So the fish, the resources, they started considering them as assets. When I say fish, I mean fishery resources, so including finfish, invertebrates, crustacean, bivalves, and so on. Okay. Furthermore, the ecosystem approach, or the ecosystem-based management, recognizes not just the resources themselves as assets, but also considering the wider aspects. And this, I think we heard this a lot. Everyone knows that ecosystem-based management deals with the social aspect, economic aspect, ecological aspect, and so on. Okay, but how then in practice you consider all these aspects to have, let's say, a successful fisheries? One key aspect that I will be talking a lot in my talk is dealing with risk. Okay, because risk is at the center, so assessing risk is at the center of managing the fisheries. But I say risk, what do you mean risk? Okay, let's see the results first. Let's see the results. So these are the results of 2018-2019. In this report, the Australian fisheries declared that 98% of their stocks were assessed as not being at risk or vulnerable through exploitation, fishing, meaning 98% at sustainable level and not at risk of having overexploitation. This is a striking figure. Okay. I remember I read some papers about 6-7 years ago, and the figure was 90%. And at that time I said, wow, 90% is a lot. Now it's 98.
What about Mediterranean, Mark?
In the Mediterranean, the situation is that 85% are overexploited. So it would 80 or 85%. I don't know the latest figure. So we are having 15% to 20%, which are, let's say, sustainably fished. However, in the Med, risk is not considered. This is a big issue because we have the results of the Med that we have 15 to 20% of sustainably fished stocks according to the maximum sustainable yield, but there is no indication of risk. We haven't managed to arrive to this business planning risk model in the Med. In Northern Europe, they are moving towards this. In the United States, they are using this approach. Okay, I'm illustrating Australia because everything started from there, and then it started going around the world in the most developing countries. Another striking result is that apart from the 98%, they say, okay, come the Australian fisheries and come international organizations outside Australia, and you do your own assessment. Please come and do an audit on us. The way business planning is done. Businesses are audited. They get external reviewers to review their business model to see if things are working. And strikingly, 90% of these fisheries have been audited, independently assessed as sustainable. So what the Australians are saying is, we assess them, and foreigner organizations assess us, and these are the results. In fisheries, as you know, examples of independent assessments are like the MSC, the Marine Stewardship Council. This is an example, okay? But there were others. So it is striking that 98% at country level and 90% from outside. So when you say 98%, what are the assets that they assessed? In the Med, the assessment is based on maximum sustainable yield. In Australia, they don't assess only maximum sustainable yield, but they assess all the fishery system, including the captured fisheries, including commercial fishery and recreational fishery. We never assessed recreational fishery in the Mediterranean, okay? Just some publications. The assessment includes protected species, habitats and ecosystems, social effects, like social amenities. Social amenity is basically the infrastructure which provides the social community for the fishing sector. So if you have a fishery, that the social infrastructure, including buildings, okay, social systems, cooperatives in place, working well to have the fishery, let's say, sustainable. Economic assets, and as an indicator, they use the gross value of the product. So instead of the maximum sustainable yield, the yield return in terms of tons of fish, but in terms of value, in terms of monetary value. The assessment deals also with the governance system. So the quotas, the harvest strategy, effort control, seasonal closures, temporary closures, spatial closures, whatever it is. And then the assessment as an extra includes also external factors. So what is the risk of external factors affecting our fishery, such climate change, foreign exchange rates, and so on. So in Australia, they assess a fishery is considered sustainably fished, that there is no risk for collapse or overfishing if all of these criteria are met. If these criteria are not met, it means that something must be done, okay, to make the fishery safe. And the report that I mentioned basically deals of managing this risk. Okay, and what is risk? The risk, according to the ISO certification, the definition is the uncertainty associated with achieving an objective. What does it mean? It basically means this. If my target is MSY, I'm using MSY as an example because it is the typical example used in many countries. It is the MSY is the objective. So the objective is to have maximum sustainable yield of a catch of, I don't know, 10,000 tons. What is the risk of not reaching that objective? What is the uncertainty? How sure we are going to reach that objective? with the current system. So with the current level of management, we are doing A, B, and C, and D. What is the chance that we will not achieve that objective? And this is key, because knowing the risk status will drive the management. If the risk status is high, the management activities should be high and focused and concentrated. If the risk level is low, it means that the management system in place is working. It's working well. So this risk gives a very good indication to the stakeholders, the ministries, the governments, the scientific community, the NGOs, the environmental groups. Remember, we are dealing now not just with MSY in the case of the Australian fisheries, but they are dealing with social, economic aspects, governance aspects. So this risk level will indicate to all the stakeholders if we are doing the right thing or if we need to do more right, if we need to be better at what we are doing. And this is key. This is key. If you go in the United States, in Australia that I'm giving the example, in some Northern European countries, they will ask, the management system is what it's called risk-based management. They don't call it maybe ecosystem approach to fisheries. They may call it ecological or ecosystem risk-based management. It's all about assessing the risk. This is key because the risk then drives the management process. So what do I mean? Just to give you an example from the report. So basically, for all the assets that I mentioned, they give what we call a risk level. So a fishery, an asset, MSY, social status, economic, and they give a risk level from negligible, so the risk is very low, the management system is perfect, to significant, where the status of the fishery is unacceptable, major changes need to be done. And there should be a recovery strategy. Okay. This will guide the management process. Okay. The risks, as I mentioned, is done at, let's say, group level. So as I showed, assets which are, for example, of ecological importance, assets which are done at socio-economic importance, and then they go at specific levels. So in the ecological aspects, for example, the ecological risks are assessed at species level or stock level, okay, habitat level. At economic or social, they are assessed at fishery level. So the social or the economic importance of the specific fishery, okay? And how these things are identified? Because I can say the fishery of bluefin tuna, the fishery, the troll fishery, they are very broad. They are very broad categories. So in order to start assessing detailed risks, what the approach does is to develop what they are called component trees. A component tree, which is easier if I show you, is a tree where for every asset, ecological asset, human asset, which is socio-economic, ability to achieve asset, governance, and so on, specific detailed assets are identified. And on these assets, the risk is assessed. So, for example, this is a tree for the community well-being, so dealing with socio-economic aspects. Okay? So for every socio-economic aspect of that specific fishery, this is split up into separate categories. As you can see, for example, it could be income from the fishery, the food developed by the fishery, the capacity of the fishery to deliver, it's good, any subsidies, the employment of the fishery, the fees involved. And for every aspect, the risk is assessed. So income. We want a good income from the fishery. What is the risk that we do not achieve that target income if the management system stays as it is? Okay. If the risk is low, meaning income is good, management is good, let's continue the way we are. If income is not good, the risk will be high that we will not achieve our objectives, so we need to do management. And this is something that the fishery manager, the minister usually who is responsible, can relate to. In my career, I have seen a lot of fisheries management that unfortunately is not translated well. It is not done in the appropriate way. The science is not delivered well, most of the time because there is no level of risk. We do things and we hope that we will achieve our objectives. This system with risk is not about hope. It's about knowing what we will achieve with what we have by assessing the risk. I will not go into more detail about the trees, but just to give you an example, there are trees for governance, okay, in the administration. There are trees for external drivers, which can include climate change, pollution, habitat degradation, economic aspects like fuel costs, exchange rates, and so on. I mean, I hope you will get a copy of the presentation, so if you want more details, you can have a look. But most of this information is available online also through many publications, especially by the FAO, which I will describe. So for every fishery, these risks, these trees are developed, which describes these various components. And apart from this risk, one refers to a reference point, so the performance level, because I said we want to achieve an objective. So if my objective is to have MSY, the MSY is my reference point. It is where I want to go. And in these assessments of these fisheries, we know the asset, MSY, where we want to arrive, the reference point, and what is the current situation, the current performance. If the current performance is equal to the reference point, the risk is low. If my objective is 10,000 tons and I am currently catching 10,000 tons, it is perfect. The fishery is sustainable. The risk level will be low. Okay? And this process is done for every, let's say, asset aspect based on the ecosystem approach to fisheries management. And this is just to give you an example. So this is an example from the report of a fishery and how it is assessed. So you have, there's a commercial fishery of, what is this fishery? Abalone. It's an abalone fishery. An abalone is a mollusk, all right, which is very common in Australia. It is a very important fishery. But the species is irrelevant. It's just the concept. So look at how this fishery is assessed. So you have a commercial fishery of 68 tons, and the total catch is 48 tons. This is acceptable. The total catch is less than the maximum sustainable yield, which is 68 tons. In the Med, if this is good, the fishery is considered sustainable. This is not ecosystem approach. This is single species style of management that was done in the 70s. So in the Mediterranean, we are still following, unfortunately, this approach. Although we are speaking a lot of ecosystem-based management, we are collecting data on ecological aspects, species and protected species, a lot of these habitats. This is not integrated into the management system. Okay, not only in the Med, but even at a global level. Bluefin tuna, which is managed by ICAT, the main objective is MSY, the quota, the total allowable catch. Only this is assessed. Okay. In the ecosystem-based approach management, as you see from this, there are other things which are assessed. For example, from the ecological perspective, bycatch species. What is the risk? In this case, negligible risk. The status is adequate. Habitat, ecosystem, and so on. Economic, the target of 1.22 million Australian dollars is not reached. This means that something must be done because the catch is not fetching the right price that the management system set up. So in this case, something needs to be done. A management action needs to be done to lower this high risk, meaning increase the profitability of the fishery. What can be the management action? Many aspects. Added value of the product, look at maybe foreign markets, whatever it may be. I'm not going to the detail about this. Okay. Same for the social. It's high risk. Governance, high risk. The system is not well. External drivers, high risk. In this case, the fishery would not, I took this example on purpose. In this case, the fishery would not be considered, this is part of the 2%. I said 98%, they are have a good level of risk. 2% are not. This fishery would be part of the 2%, which in many other countries, the experience in the Mediterranean, it is unthinkable because people say, no, the catch is less than the commercial target. We are good. But we know in many cases in the Med, if this is good, it doesn't mean that the situation is good because fishermen, maybe they are not earning enough money. The economic return is low. The governance system is not working. The controls is not working. There is a lot of illegal fishing going on. Okay? So ecosystem approach, it's not ecosystem in the biological sense, in the habitat and ecosystem sense in the sea, but the ecosystem considering the human component of the ecosystem, which includes, as you know, we are part of nature. Humans are part of nature, which includes economic, we need money, social, we need work, the governance, the way we manage, and then considering also the external factors that they come. So the base of the ecosystem-based fisheries management, many have the misconception that it deals with ecology, the animal ecology, not the animal and human ecology. As soon as you put the human ecology inside, then you open up the other factors, economic, social, governance, so on, which are reflected into this kind of management system. When it comes to the, let me check the time because time is passing very fast. Okay. When it comes to the ecological aspects, I just wanted to mention something since I imagine most of us are biologists and my background is in biology as well, in stock assessment and so on. I wanted to point out some aspects about stock assessment because what they do in the Australian fisheries system and in the ecosystem-based approach, they use some levels in assessing stocks. What does it mean? So when assessing stocks, as you know, most of the time we do not have the perfect data. Sometimes we have a very basic data, like catch. This is the basic data. Sometimes we have catch data and effort data, number of fishing days involved, whatever. And sometimes we have a more detailed data, including biological characteristics of the stocks, okay, length, age, and so on. However, this doesn't stop. This is a critical issue because many countries, including in the European Union, unfortunately think the more data you have, the more you can do ecosystem-based management. This is a very big misconception. Okay, why? Because even with a little amount of data, you can still go through this approach. You can still go and decide the level of risk and then do appropriate management actions. The Australian fisheries, when it comes to data, especially stock assessment data, they say, okay, we will categorize the data we have based on 5 levels. So the first level is we have only catch data, okay? And then the indication of the vulnerability of the fishery. If the catch data shows that it went down 50% in the past 10 years, we have high vulnerability of the fishery. Sometimes you don't need complicated models to have a result or an indication of the state of exploitation. Level 2 is catch data plus fishery dependent effort. So we have the effort data. Level 3, this plus biological sampling of the catch. So the life history parameters, fishing mortality, size, growth parameters, and so on. Level 4 is this plus fishery independent surveys. So surveys done independent of the fishery. And level 5 is something more complicated when you have simulation and assessment models. The complicated age-structured models, okay, that they can give you. Whatever level you have, you can still do ecosystem-based management. This is critical. You cannot let ecosystem-based management stop if you have only level 1. And I will show you the example of how they do it in Australia. So the first case is a fishery related to rock lobster. So the assessment level, this is the first row, is 5, meaning they have very good data, models, everything. The commercial catch is 6,300 tons. This is the quota, the catch range, the performance measure, the indicator, and the fishery is catching around 6,400 tons. The fishery is considered acceptable. The catch is within the TACC. There is a bit more, 1.5% more. Okay, so it's considered good. Another fishery, level 1, meaning they only have catch. They don't have anything else. So it is the catch in tons of the small pelagic fishery. But they can still have an indication and assess if it is acceptable or not. In this case, it is acceptable with a comment that the catch is too low. The point is this, the point is not in the details. The point is ecosystem-based management can still be done irrespective of what data you have, irrespective of what knowledge you have. You can do it with the most basic knowledge. And I will show you examples in Turkey, in other places in the world, that this was done. So I described basically this risk concept and everything that revolves with it. I'm very short on time and I will try to hurry up a little bit. So to give some minutes for question.
Mark,
yes?
Please do not worry about the time. We are flexible, so we can extend the 10 minutes, 15 minutes, the time of the presentation. Don't worry about this. You feel free to use your time, please.
Okay, thank you. So why am I mentioning FAO now? I worked with FAO for 9 years. So what FAO did basically is, because the role of FAO is to, as you know, produce a lot of technical guidelines to help countries develop technical measures, the management system, stock assessment, socioeconomic aspects, and so on. So what FAO did is, this started like 20 years ago, 15, 20 years. They said, look, there is the Australians, they are doing very nice fisheries management. It's working very well. The risk-based approach is there. So let's use this experience and try to make it to the general public, to the general countries, because the Australians, they care about Australia. They don't, they are their country, they develop the system for their country, it works well, and they move forward. They're not interested to, they publish this, but it is not their mandate, their role, to show this to the other countries around the world. So what the FAO did is try to bridge this gap between what was happening in Australia with the risk-based approach and bring it to the rest of the world. And that's what FAO did, okay? They developed a system to make it simple to apply this approach in practice, okay? And yes, and a lot of publications started coming up, starting from 2000, Fisheries Management, which is the first one, the ecosystem approach to fisheries, developed in many publications, many technical documents, books, okay? And the core content is related to what I have just explained. The way the FAO did was that they made it in a simpler way, okay? So what is the main result? Because let's say I am country X, and I say, okay, I like this risk-based management. Australia, it's working fantastic. What do? I get an Australian here and show me how to do it? That is one option. What FAO did is they developed this planning process to arrive to the management system based on risk. And what I'm showing you on the screen is basically this process. So this process, it could take 2 weeks to explain in detail how this process is done. And I will try to dedicate only 5 minutes for this. The main concept is that there exists a process on how to achieve management that we know it works because it worked in Australia. You tell me, yes, but Australia is a very developed country. It is very highly skilled, a lot of resources. Again, this approach, FAO, has been pushing this approach and doing this approach for 15 years in many countries, in developing countries, in Africa, Southeast Asia, South America, and it's working as well. It will not work with the same speed, maybe, or effectiveness as is done in Australia because of resources, of money, but the risk-based approach is working still. Because you can still deal with the risk even with a low amount of knowledge. On the right-hand side, I am writing best available knowledge. So you can still achieve risk assessment and management action with the best knowledge, again, in full consultation on left-hand side with the stakeholders. So basically, the process in summary is, first you start planning. So you decide, okay, I want to do this process. You get the support from the ministry, the Fisheries Administration, and you develop what's called, let's say, the basic structure of the fishery. The first thing, you need to understand what the fishery is dealing with. What is the area of the fishery? What are the geographical boundaries of the fishery? How many vessels are involved? What are the stocks? What are the bycatch species? What are the habitats impacted? What are the economic return of the fishery? What are the social benefits of the fishery? So it is a process of really understanding the fishery from the ecosystem approach. So considering all the assets that I have described, okay, from the, let's say, natural ecosystem to the human. I don't like to use natural because humans are part of nature, but the, let's say, the environment ecosystem without humans and the human part of the ecosystem. Once this is fisheries understood, which is step 1, then you start doing the risk assessment. So developing component trees, like the ones I showed you for the fishery, and make a risk assessment procedure. So determining the risk. Once the risk is known, and this is crucial, the management system, step 3, can be developed. So the case like I showed you in the tables, like this one, okay? This system, this is the management system. So you have the level of assessment, which is the data. You have the catch, which is the performance measure, the indicator, my target catch, the TAC, the total allowable catch. The toll could be effort. It could be income from the economic terms. It could be, if you are speaking about enforcement, it could be, I need 100 inspections of enforcement every year. So there is the indicator, the performance measure, sorry. Okay. The indicator is the lending in this case. And then you report the current situation. So the catch reported, catch rate for the season reported. So it is the actual catch. And then you can conclude if it's acceptable or not. And if it's not acceptable, you can decide what management measure would need to be conducted. And this is step 3. So this is the planning process. Once these have been decided, and it is a desk study, the study meaning it is not fieldwork, but sorry, I don't want to use the term fieldwork because it's misleading. It is a desk job in consultation with stakeholders, because the fieldwork comes with the stakeholders, with the discussion, using the best knowledge. This system can be developed. Once the system is developed, then it comes to the 4th step, which is the implementation. So doing what we agreed to do, collecting data if need be, you doing the enforcement, measuring the catch, doing stock assessments, and so on and so forth, and monitor the situation, which is the step 4. Okay. So what FAO did is took the Australian experience, put it into easy steps that everyone could follow. Okay. I'm not going into the details about this, so I will step a little bit. Basically, if these steps are followed, so just to repeat a little bit, the first step, you gather the basic information of the fishery. The second step, you do the risk analysis, okay, the risk assessment. So you have the assets and you assess the risk. The third step is you develop the management system with, as I mentioned, objectives, indicators, and management options. And the result comes a management plan. And I am sure every one of you have heard about a management plan. But many times, the way the management plan is developed, it is not a risk-based management plan. Or if it is a risk-based management plan, the risks are not done according to the ecosystem approach, meaning considering all the assets, ecological, economic, social, governance, and so on. The case of the Bluefin tuna, for example, which is known everywhere around the world, there is a management plan. They call it recovery plan. Okay, but there is a risk level, but only for catch, for the target species. There is no on and some bycatch. There's nothing mentioned about social aspects, economic aspects, governance aspects. Okay, so even international organizations, high level, unfortunately, have not arrived at this kind of level like the Australian fisheries. Like the United States are very well. The United States work like this very well. But the buzzword there is management plan. I'm coming to the end.
It should. No. Yeah, I'm just going to provide extra information if you let me. I think it should be done also with the full participations of the stakeholders. I mean, it should care or take into account co-management approach as well. I mean, EAF covers co-management. Can we say this?
Yes. Yes, I will show like in the examples, but in this slide, the left-hand side, the consultation with stakeholders, and the right-hand side, these are 2 pillars. Stakeholders are key because without doing this process in full, not consultation, there is a mistake there. I don't like the word consultation. It should be participation. Because consultation is me going to you to ask your opinion. It is not like that. It is me and you sitting together and work things together in one group as partners.
So the audience who are interested in this process should see also hierarchy of the co-management by Berkes et al. I mean the informative, consultative, participative, etc. community up to community-based. So you mean there is a great difference between consultative and the participatory approach. Okay, thank you. Please go ahead.
So let me close by showing what's going on in Turkey, because I know most of the participants are Turkish. I've been working in Turkey for many years now, both as a FAO and as the IFISH coordinator. So I would give you just a brief what's going on in Turkey. But this is an example. Turkey is a very good example of what's going on in the rest of the world, including some European countries in the Mediterranean and many developing countries around the world. So first of all, there is this the IFISH project, and I will mention what is going on EAF. And two pilot projects that are going, one in Gökova Bay and one in Gökçeada. So in the IFISH project, this is the project that I am coordinating, which will finish in September this year. The aspects we are dealing with ecosystem approach, we are dealing at governance level, meaning we developed a paper, a strategy paper, which deals with how fisheries management should be done. And the way fisheries management should be done, this is the proposal to the ministry, to the general director, to the Ministry of Agriculture and Fisheries in Turkey, is to follow the ecosystem approach. So following ecosystem approach, meaning following the risk-based approach that is being done in Australia. Okay, this is very important, because if this strategy paper is adopted by the government, this is the way fisheries management will be done in Turkey, using this kind of approach, not the approach which is based on MSY. Okay, there is a big misconception, I'm sorry to say this, in the European Union. Most of the common fisheries policy targets are MSY, and then they say ecosystem approach. But the ecosystem approach is not integrated into the risk-based management, indicators, performance measures, and so on. There are no indicators and performance measures for social aspects, economic aspects, or they may be some, but they are not well structured. Okay, if Turkey adopts this kind of approach, it will be a huge step forward, a huge high-level technical know-how on how to do business planning in fisheries management. And I am, let's say, sure that this kind of approaches eventually will enter within the ministerial framework. Apart from this, we did some training courses, but okay, we did some training courses on how to do this approach. Another two case studies that I mentioned that were done using this approach. Okay, there are two case studies in Turkey. They were done using the risk-based approach. These case studies were supported by FAO, and I will go through them very fast. There were a lot of stakeholder consultation. Documents were produced. Okay, and in the case, I'm just showing you some pictures to show the work that was done by many colleagues. Okay, it was a lot of work to develop this methodology. The end result is risk assessment. So in the case of Gökova, they identified 110 assets. 71 dealing with ecological aspects, including target species, bycatch habitats, 17 socioeconomic, and 24 dealing with governance, enforcement, control, management, and so on, legislation. These assets were given a risk level, and 31 of them are high risk, 67 low risk. 67 low risk is very, very good, meaning the current management system in Gökova, you have 67 issues, assets, which are well covered with the current management system. This is extremely good. 31 of the total the risk is high. So the objectives to reach what we want to achieve, which are the objectives are ecological, social, and ability to achieve, there's a high risk that for 31 of these, we will not reach the objective. And this, based on this, a management plan was developed for the Gyokova Bay. Gyokova was a good case study because it is an MPA and there was a lot of work. That's why the risk level of 67 assets is low, because there was already a lot of work being done in that case study with many other projects, both European, local, national, international projects, and so on. So this was an expected like result to have low risk for a lot of issues, which is very positive. This case study was brought up at high level, okay, at the Director General of Fisheries, which, Vahdet, correct me if I'm wrong, really took up this process and they approved the management plan, okay?
Yes, correct.
And now there it is, the process of implementation. So Turkey is actually at the forefront, even compared to many other European countries, that you are starting to implement the risk-based approach of Australia, this same system of Australia, on a small case study, which is a start. Okay, so this is quite, for me, impressive. Yes, it was endorsed, but it's still in the implementation process. This case study was also awarded some best practice because it is a type of co-management. Okay, it was recognized by the FAO as an important step. And the remaining challenges are to continue now meeting the costs associated to implement this plan. This is a step that needs to be, let's say, done, and now it's the difficult step. It is to do the implementation, which was step 4 in what I described. Hopefully, things eventually will start moving. Yes, there were publications and so on. And the next challenge now in Turkey is the Gökçeada, which is an island in the Aegean Sea. And there will be a similar case study to deal with this island. Things have started already. There has been our first stakeholder meeting. I think the first report was done in 2021, always supported by the FAO. And hopefully things will continue. The way to move forward is this, to have most of these case studies, get the system more into the general management system, and hopefully things will continue from there, also dealing with bigger fisheries. The discussions I personally had with the ministries is they want to apply this approach, hopefully in the future, if there is funding, to bigger fisheries, the most important fisheries in Turkey, okay? Like anyway, the bigger fisheries, not to mention any names, because this approach was found to be quite remarkable. The stakeholders were very happy. It's a participatory approach. The result came from the bottom up, and there is more chance that the stakeholder community will respect what was decided among the stakeholders themselves, and hopefully will be implemented. So I want to close this session, which I took exactly 1 hour, with the last slide, and maybe Vahdet, this is in Turkish. You wanted to mention something about this, so please go ahead.
Mark, thank you so much for the excellent presentation. It was such a nice lecture rather than conference for us. We learned a lot from your presentation. Thanks a lot. Thanks a millions, really, indeed. I impressed a lot, and I really wish we had more participations. But nowadays, I really don't know what is going on in terms of showing interest in this type of activities. The pandemic affected people's behavior and the interest area. This is what I can say about the, let's say, reason of lack of participation. However, we benefited a lot. So thanks a lot. About this last slide, whoever interested in the subject and they want to know the recent progress related to ecosystem approach to fisheries initiatives in Turkey, SÜRKOP is Central Union of Fishery Cooperative Association in Turkey, represents almost 20,000 fisheries. And this quarterly published journal distributed to administrative sites, academic sites, as well as fishery cooperatives. So everyone who is related to subject fisheries issues are aware about this publication. So we have written what we have done in Gökova, what is going to be there in Gökçeada, in Turkish, in the journal, which is going to be published in this month. At the end of the June, will be ready. This is why we put this slide at the end. Whoever interested in ecosystem approach to fisheries initiatives in Turkey can get information, recent information from the journal in Turkish. So now I also want to inform our participants about that we published a full text in Hidromedit conference together with you, our dear colleague Mümtaz Trashin and Marcelo Vasconcelos about ecosystem approach to fisheries initiatives in Turkey. Is there a hope for the success? It was the title of the full text, I think. So we're still at the level of implementation. It is really good that as a Turkey, they followed the template of the FAO and prepared, designed one fisheries management plan, considering or in accordance with the EAF. So the time is, high time to implement this approach or this plan into the practice. By the way, Mark, can you switch off your presentation?
Yes.
We will get some questions and answers right now.
Yes.
Okay. So I see the name of Mümtaz Trashin among the participants, some students, some of our colleagues, even the Vice Dean of the faculty. I'm sure the head of our department. I'm sure we have some contributions or questions, concerns from the participants. We are ready to get them. Any questions, please? By the way, we are followed through the not only Teams, but also YouTube channel, so we can get questions. We can start with Mümtaz Trashin if he is there, because he has already written, sent his expression about the presentation. He impressed a lot, he liked it a lot. Mümtaz? Can you hear us? Or you can write. Okay, any question? I see the name of Mr. Hüseyin Özbilgin. He's now working in GFCM in the Black Sea Fisheries. Okay, Zafer Tosunoğlu has a question, I think. Tevfik, can you help us to hear his voice? Zafer?
Yes. Hi, Mark and everyone. Thank you very much for your presentation, Mark. As always, very good presentation. I can ask a question. Can risk-based ecosystem approach fisheries be applied to large-scale area, for example, Black Sea? Is management system can be applied. As you know, for example, anchovy is a shared stocks. Black Sea is a very different characteristics, ecosystems. and so many problems. It can be applied in, for example, Black Sea, large area?
Yes. So the answer is simple. It is yes, and I will mention why. I will give you an example of the Bluefin tuna fishery, which is a big fishery fished by so many countries. They have the approach is ecosystem, but not ecosystem. What do I mean? They still have the indicators, the performance measures, the quota, the data collection, the enforcement. They have everything. The system, the management system is the same like the EAF. The only difference is, and this is applied at international level, the only difference is they do not include other ecosystem indicators like for social, economic, and governance aspect. So if they take the Bluefin tuna management plan and they expand it to include the ecosystem approach, they can arrive to the management system of ecosystem approach. So this can be done in the Black Sea as well. Okay, because the problem is not if it can be done. The problem is that we are unfortunately saying we want to do ecosystem approach, but we go to MSY only. This is contradictory. MSY is of the 70 single species assessment. So if you have anchovies, yes, MSY of anchovies, then economic aspects, governance aspects, other ecological aspects. Okay, why everything is fixated on MSY? Because we didn't understand what is ecosystem approach.
You're right.
Okay.
One of the components of ecosystem approach to fisheries is ability to achieve. For instance, it is I think it is not well understood by the non-native English speakers. Ability to achieve. What is this? But if you read a little bit more on this, it is the level and the ability and the skill of the management organizations and the governance system to deal with or to able to solve the issues has already been identified by risk assessment. Once you identify them, you should check your management organizations and the tools which are in practice are eligible or not to solve these problems. Am I right?
Yes, I want to mention something and this is what we call in what we call it's a difficult pill to swallow. What does it mean? It's like you are taking a bad medicine or a medicine that you don't like. Imagine if you do a risk assessment of the GFCM in the Black Sea, the management system in the Black Sea, which is managed by the GFCM. You need to go through all the issues of the GFCM, give the risk associated with not achieving the objective, and then fix it. Understand? This is the risk assessment. And sometimes management organizations, even at international level, are reluctant to do this. This is the ability to achieve the governance system. Okay. Okay,
Mark, we have some followers from the YouTube. One of them is Mümtaz. His statement is word to be shared with you. He says, it's a wonderful presentation, very informative and reproductive. Thank you for amazing work and the true review, Mark. He sends his regards and loves to you. And he says, Tunca as a question to Mark, would you please share your views on success and failures of total allowable catch, individual transferable quotas towards sustainable fisheries management, if possible, with the examples from different fisheries? Okay, then Hüseyin Özbilgin has another question. I'm gonna let you know later on. Let's start with the Mümtaz and then Sezgin question about the individual transferable quotas.
So the answer to the quota system is very complex. It could take a whole lecture discussing quotas. Okay. Trying to give a simple answer is usually quotas work very well for specific fisheries, anchovy fisheries, which is a very single species or 2 or 3 species stock. And you need very good control mechanisms. So Bluefin tuna, it's working very well, but very, very expensive control. Okay.
And the enforcement should be very strong.
Very strong. Some countries, I will mention, for example, Faroe Islands, which have completely removed the quotas, the TACs, but they use effort quotas, which are much easier to manage, much cheaper to enforce, okay, very easy, and they succeed. You tell me, but Faroe Island is a small country. They have big fisheries. There are other examples of fisheries using effort control. Okay.
And Iceland is another example.
Iceland, they are adopted.
Yes, adopted ITQ, but there's a huge debate, especially from the social scientists, that almost all the quota rights belong to one company. There is a monopoly in Iceland. But if you look at the fisheries, yes, it is managed profitable, it is managed conservative, but there are some defects as well.
Yes, this is my personal opinion from my experience. I would prefer an effort quota, so not catch quota, simply because when you regulate effort, you are regulating the impact on the ecosystem. You are regulating not on the target species, which, you know, in the target species quota, you can have discards because they discard the small fish because of the return. Okay, a lot of black fish come into play. There are a lot of illegalities with this, a lot of problems. High grading, for example. So effort control is you regulate the amount of the boats going out. It's easy to control. You reduce the impact on all the same on the target, bycatch, habitat. It is a completely ecological friendly management measure. It's my personal opinion.
Yes, Mark. By the way, thank you for the good question, Sizgin. Hüseyin Özbilgin has a question, and then Alexia is raising her hand. I will give the floor to Alexia after Özbilgin. Hüseyin says, hi, Mark. Can you please share your personal opinion on how optimistic you are about the implementation of EAF for overall Turkish fisheries? What do you think about this?
Yes.
By the way, be honest and realistic, huh?
Yes, sure, obviously. Yeah. So, the main aspect I want to give I'm doing now a case study on EAF in my country. I am back to my country and I'm doing this for the government. I'm mentioning this why? Because the main is that the government accepts this and puts it into the legislation. Once it is in the legislation, then things can start moving. Before, if the government doesn't endorse this and it's not in the fisheries legislation, things will unfortunately get stuck. Okay, because even the legislation says you give a fine to a fisherman. I know the case of Turkey. There are a lot of legislations on fines. If the legislation says you give a fine to a fisherman if he does this, then this, the regulator has to do it. It's in the law. If the law says you have to develop management plan for anchovy fishery according to EAF, if this is the law, the DG Fisheries has to do it. So the law is extremely bottleneck.
Yes.
Once the law is there, then maybe you can have a bit of more start.
Okay. Once the law is there, I will continue from that point. You need to be honest. You should have willingness. You should really put your all effort and sincerity to do this. I mean, if you have a willingness, you can do whatever you wish. this willingness should come from the administrative side, because they have a power to manage fisheries. I do not have, as a researcher, I do my research and publish, and I provide some scientific suggestions, you know, some, let's say, advice, but this is all I can. That's why I actually, let's say, co-founder of one NGO. So now I'm combating not only from the scientific sides, but also NGO sides. But this is not sufficient. You need to get contribution and the, let's say, help of fishers through the fishery cooperatives, which is better, as well as administrative sides. I mean, whoever has a power to manage fisheries should be at the table, should show its real willingness and the authority and power to deal with this issue. I think this is what I think, actually. Okay, now the floor is Alexia. Alexia, are you still there?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, please. Can you introduce yourself, please?
Yes, I'm Alexia Monfalolucci. I'm working at Aqua Biotech group with Mark, and I'm a scientific consultant in the fisheries department. So, Mark, good morning, and thanks for the brilliant presentation. Really informative about the EAF. I just have one question that is small, but maybe if you can help us understand briefly, what are the hindering factors for the Mediterranean Sea to adopt the EAF system? Since you have been in different countries and you presented also different case studies, what do you think is so difficult for the Mediterranean countries to adopt a system that obviously proves to be successful?
Very good question.
Very good question. First of all, there are many factors. First of all is knowledge. There's a lack of knowledge. You don't find, if you go in the university and you have a course on fisheries management, no one teaches you this approach. No one. They are being introduced slowly in some universities in the Netherlands, for example, Denmark, because the Baltic Sea, they use a lot of this kind of risk-based approaches. In the United States as well. But in the Med, unfortunately, this knowledge does not exist. So this is the first bottleneck, because if people don't know about it, okay, they cannot do it. I personally didn't know about it 10 years ago. I got to know about it 8 years ago, and I got trained in this approach. So this is the first bottleneck. Then once people know about it, this has to be implemented, because in the governance system, in the legislation, because in the Med, we are doing management plans. The European countries all have management plans for many fisheries. It is a European legislation. But the European legislation doesn't say you have to develop a risk-based approach to develop management plans. It says you have to develop a management plan. Meaning, I could write the management plan and put it in paper, and it is adopted. So there is also a lack of knowledge inside the European Union about this. If the EU puts a legislation, risk-based approach, and they will start assessing this through the STECF, things will start moving in that direction within the, I'm saying, European. So it's twofold: lack of knowledge, and then legislation to start moving in this direction.
Okay, thanks. It was very clear. Hopefully we'll manage to make things change.
Yes, hopefully. Alexia and Mark, let me share one of the recent progress related to this question, actually. We put on the table triggering factors and the bottlenecks of implementation of ecosystem approach to fisheries in the Mediterranean through the FAO publication, Fisheries and Aquaculture Technical Paper, which is going to be published this year, at the end of this year, hopefully, namely Transition to Ecosystem Approach to Fisheries in the Mediterranean, Lessons from Selected Case Studies. We collected 10 case studies from the Mediterranean, from Malta about the Lambuka fishery, and from Turkey, small-scale fisheries, from Lebanon, from Egypt, from Italy, clam fishery, and from Italy, another case, Sicily, etc. So this publication will be very useful to see or to show interested users, to show the lessons we learn regarding the bottlenecks and the triggering factors for the implementation of EAF in ecosystem approach to fisheries. I just want to share with you this recent news. Thank you. Any other question, please? Mr. Tevfik, any questions? Okay. So if there is no another question, I would like to express my sincere thanks to Mark DIMECH, my good friend Mark DIMECH. We have been known each other for 15 years or more than 15 years. They've been to many meetings, international meetings, and we are very lucky such an experienced researcher actually work with us in Turkey. Now, even now, during the iFish project as a technical director, Mark is sharing his experience and knowledge with the Turkish scientific community and administrative community. And I'm sure we will continue with keep in touch with Mark and FAO and the other international experienced colleagues in order to improve management of fisheries in Turkey based on especially ecosystem approach to fisheries management. So thank you so much, Mark. Thanks for all. I hope we can meet again in another meeting. I would like to express my head of department gratitude, Akın İlyas, Prof.Dr, as well as our Dean of Faculty, Ursunlu. They encouraged us to realize these organizations, which are very useful. Before you, we hosted here Wojtek Piasecki, editor of Acta Etiologia Piscoteria, and a very well-known scientist, Daniel Pauli, just was before your conference. You are the third one. We will continue with the researchers like you to improve our information knowledge on the fisheries issues and management issues. Thank you so much, Mark. Last verse, for the last verse, the floor is yours, Mark.
Oh, thank you for the invitation. I really enjoyed it because I had to prepare and I got a nice update for myself about what's going on in other parts of the world. So it was a good experience for me as well. And thank you for the invitation. Hopefully, as you said, we meet again, hopefully in Turkey, for a Iraqi.
Yes, sure. And the last but not the least, I would like to express my sincere thanks to my colleague Tevfik. This organization would not have been possible without him. Actually, he provided all his, let's say, support in terms of technical issues, which I'm not good at. But I think during the conference, not only in Teams, MS Teams, but also in YouTube channel, audience are able to follow the conference without having any problem. Thank you, Tevfik. Okay, ciao, guys.
Bye. Thank you very much.
Bye.
Bye. Bye.